Because 3 months and 30 pounds. There, that's my own accomplishment. So went from 215 to 185, and that was the goal. So here I am. And yeah, feel awesome, feel much better than last semester. I've been teaching at home for a year and stuff like that. And the farm work just goes from like a whole bunch in the fall to nothing. So feeling like a super ninja, and all of you are as well. But wow, that's like if you hold like a 10-pound like weight, and then you think that you know, you imagine 15 extra pounds on each knee, whatever that might be, you know, so whatever you're losing, that's just extra weight on your knees. So I am already, wow, yeah, I've been feeling better for a while, but just hitting that goal is awesome. Okay. Doesn't really have anything to do with the class whatsoever. So anyway, good morning to all of you, or good afternoon, I guess. We're going to wrap up. I'm going to wrap up the chapter on biodiversity today, and we're going to segue into the chapter on water. I do want to look over here, and so it looked like today, if I pop back to the home page, how many people have done that? 39, I guess, so far it looks like. But today is the due date for your post, 1 week in advance of the final due date. So if you have not contributed to that discussion yet, and what is that discussion? Oh, Dive. Yeah, that's a great film on food waste. Love it. It's not all that long, and I think it's absolutely usable as a source for your food waste paper. I will go ahead and put up, if they're not already up in the announcements, they may not be, but there's 3 links for your food waste paper that's due in April. I want to talk about that paper in a little bit more detail, maybe next time, maybe today, we'll see. But read it over, take a look at it. I provide you with 3 sources, peer-reviewed links. This movie, Dive, is another source. The textbook is a potential source. And so it's proposing solutions to food waste. I think it's a big deal. I think it relates to everybody. Everybody eats. So if you took my 100 class, I do a paper on food production and looking at some specific aspect of that. Now for the 220, we're looking at food waste in particular. So fantastic to have 60 people here. I know that this is mid-semester, so either the plays on the videos or the amount of people actually making it to class physically tends to dip a little bit. Don't let this be a time when your grade dips a little bit. So make sure you stay on top of it. I believe, is next Friday, March 5th already? Like all of a sudden we're in February, and then wow, just almost through the first week, but by next week. So keep that in mind, everybody, that's when the next solution paper, the Stamets piece, is due. And yeah, I don't feel like things are too stressful right now, or a pace. I need to work on my backgrounds. I need to get a bunch of Star Wars backgrounds. I'm watching people's backgrounds change in real time. It's the most psychedelic thing. It's awesome. It's like, I need some fantastic Star Wars backgrounds. I suppose I could just put like one of the toys, one of the tons of toys that I have, you know, behind me. My son zooms. He's got like a ridiculous toy collection of vintage stuff. He even has his own store on eBay and stuff, but he has like, he zooms for his classes in front of a thing that's like, I don't know, $10,000 worth of vintage Transformers, but it looks absolutely awesome. So anyway, yeah, I appreciate that. All right. So yeah, just look, this is a basic reminder. Keep up with the class. If you haven't read the food waste paper or the assignment, go to the assignment and read it. Look through, see what's required of you, see what's coming up. Are there any questions right now about anything in this class, the pacing, honestly, anything? Didn't realize this changes as I'm looking at. Oh, anything? Okay. All right, well, then we'll just keep going forward. But what week are we? 7 or 8? Are we 8? Is this officially the halfway point? Okay, it's getting close, right? So it doesn't even seem like that could be possible, though, does it? Right? But we're definitely a 16-week semester. We're getting there, you know, and things are moving in a little bit weird way because of, you know, spring break and all those I won't say what I was going to say, all those things. All right, great. So I'm my spring break, I teach at 3 different colleges, and all the different colleges have different spring breaks this semester. And one of them even has an alternate, so that I have to be around for one of 2 different weeks that people have spring breaks. So my spring break, I don't have a spring break. I'm not going to have a spring break. I don't know. Anyway, I don't know if I usually do anything anyway. All right, so let's go back to, let me do a screen share here on biodiversity. We'll talk a little bit about, I just opened up some questions in Top Hat, so if you have not opened up those questions yet, please do. Okay, screen share. All right. So before we talked about biodiversity hotspots, right? Biogeographic region with sufficient reservoir of biodiversity that's under threat from humans, okay? And this map is a bit older. It's 18 years old. So, you know, it doesn't have to have gotten bigger, the hotspots or the areas that are under threat, but it has. And so what does that mean, right? I'm going to talk about it just briefly with this problem of the concept of ecosystem. And it's interesting because if I were to say, what's more important to you, right? A tropical rainforest, like, or in South America, you know, it's a big tropical rainforest, or like wetlands or marshes. I imagine that, and usually it's, you know, 90% of people are like, well, the rainforest, obviously, you know, there's so many things we can find in it and so many biodynamic services that it provides. But then, of course, you know, that's one of the reasons that we run into these biodiversity hotspots, because of not necessarily a technical or scientific reason, but because of a sociological reason, because we have learned to see those areas as more important, right? And therefore, sometimes we can ignore areas, and then other areas like wetlands or something like that, we sort of come to value and recognize as less than, and then those areas, maybe they're developed with housing or for housing instead of preserved in ways. And of course, we know that the rainforests and tropical rainforests are being cut down at an alarming rate as well. But how do we find enough value to change human behavior and let people know just how important these things are? So we know that rainforests provide, I mean, too numerous to mention as far as ecosystem services, but climate regulation, nutrient cycling, and the earth really being able to breathe. And wetlands, though, although they're ignored, still provide many of the same ecological services, right? Erosion control, nutrient cycling, climate regulation to a certain degree, storm protection, water purification. Yet these areas will be paved over and drained and removed at an even faster pace for development than rainforests. So where's that put us, right? When we talk about human beings, I asked a question today, which is, you know, can human beings be a positive or make a positive impact on biodiversity? So far, we haven't necessarily been talking about that, right? Although we have looked at some solutions in this chapter, particularly as we look at the multitude of solutions presented by Paul Stamets. My partner hates Jim Carrey. I think Jim Carrey is one of those people that you either like love or you absolutely can't stand. She can't stand him. But so humans, right? Where do we fall in all of this? A species that creates and alters ecosystems, right? So we absolutely have to measure this into biodiversity. And I would hope, and I do think that there's some, you know, of that happening, that we can be in there as a positive factor, right? You know, where are the positive impacts? How can we measure them? What is our involvement and responsibilities as a human or as human beings, right? As a species ourselves. And so let me stop sharing here real quick. And let's look at what folks said in as far as that's concerned with that question. So we have 53 people click in, which is awesome. Thank you so much. I know I released the questions later today. Like I said, just busy. But can humans be a positive factor on biodiversity? 48 yes, and 5 no. So how so? You know, in what ways, as I'm hoping, right, that we can be a positive factor for biodiversity, but in what ways? We are overwhelmingly in the yes. I'd like to hear from the no's. What do you think? We factor into all of this too, as biodiversity, as a part of this chain that makes a huge impact. What do you think?
I mean, just an example that I thought of was, I think just a couple days ago now, the organization that saved, I think, a couple thousand cold stunned turtles in Texas.
That's right. That's right.
So yeah, if we like if humans apply themselves to those types of causes, we can be helpful. But a lot of times we're more harmful than we are helpful.
That's awesome. That's maybe the most awesome thing I've heard out of this whole piece. This Texas massive failure would be that right there. Would not be the people that now have a $60,000 electric bill for those days, and I don't even know what's going to happen. But that's deregulation, and we talk about deregulation in this class, right? You can apply it to oil and gas industry. You can apply it to like, oh, I guess a regulation that they've looked at, or an industry that they've looked at deregulating recently, is chickens, right? So now they want to produce a lot of those overseas where there is no regulation and then ship them back here. So now we've added a totally massive step, right, on as far as like a footprint for transport and fuel and all that. But deregulation is something that oftentimes the GOP will push for. And I think that we have examples of how that might serve a market, but not people very well. So great. Yeah, good. I really like that. Seed labs, like the one at CSU. Katrina, would you like to explain yourself a bit or follow up with that?
Yeah, so it's pretty much what they do, and CSU is just like one of like the many offices. They essentially just have a bank just full of different types of seeds from different periods of time. So essentially that's just there in the instance of like some like environmental thing that maybe ruins crops or just causes complete like biodiversity, at least in plants, to kind of falter. They have a backup, so they have something to preserve that species pretty much indefinitely.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic. You know, something can get cross-pollinated. You know, could get, you know, ruined by a GMO pollination, for example, something like that. I mean, we have to understand there are so many strains of corn just in like Central America. And a lot of those places like Monsanto was moving in, and they were some of the first people to kick Monsanto out because those are ancient strains. Seed saving is very important. And yes, absolutely important to us as a way to, it's like a zoo, right? We're going to talk about that a bit today. Ex situ and in situ ways to preserve things like that and make sure that things last. But yeah, seed banks. There's one in Decorah. I went to school for my undergraduate at Luther College in Decorah, Iowa. Love that place. There's a fantastic seed place there. And I know that this was a couple of years ago now, but one of the big ones in the Arctic had actually started to flood or something. There was some water penetration because of climate change that was threatening the seed bank at the time. I think that that's been, you know, taken care of because it's a while ago now, but that's awesome that we have one at CSU. And of course, yeah, okay, anyway, next. So how else can we? These are all very good ideas. And again, fantastic solution ideas so that you know that, you know, we continuously with every chapter look at what's the solution. They call them, does anybody know what seed bombs are? Have we talked about that in this class yet? No? Somebody tell me what they are. I'm not a big fan. I'm a big fan of the thought of it and the concept of it, though I'm not a big fan of the term seed bomb. I'd rather us find like a nonviolent term for that. Madison, you were shaking your head. Do you mind if I call on you?
So seed bombs are pretty much, they're like literal balls of seeds that you can just kind of throw everywhere, and then they'll make their own little like forest or big thing of flowers. So it's, you don't have to like go in and plant every single seed. It's a lot easier and more efficient to do.
Yeah, and does anybody know the really awesome deviant part of all of this? Because when I got into this years ago, I was like, I thought it was interesting, and then I got into it and I was like, oh, this is really cool. There's a very deviant and yet very awesome, like some people might call it deviant, some people might not. What do you think? Way that these are used and function for these, sort of beyond saving time planting. Anybody? Marijuana? That's hilarious. Just marijuana? I don't know why you're typing marijuana. I'm all about it, but but now I'm not thinking about it in terms of this. Yeah, so the deviant part is not necessarily cannabis, but it's taking seeds that might be native to an area, and a lot of times they're sold with like slingshots so that you can go seed areas that you want to seed. And if maybe places have been overgrown with plants that aren't native to an area or genetically modified plants or you name it, this is a way to get back in and redo that and get seeds to places where you should not, or it might be illegal to. And I think that when I started to invent, this is old now, when I started to look at this 10 years ago, I was like, what a cool deviant thing. Like, just like I'd be okay being arrested for so many things as a sociologist, like, you know, dumpster diving, I would also be fine if somebody was like, what are you doing? Well, I'm shooting as many or dropping as many or sending as many natural prairie seeds or whatever back onto your property as I possibly can to propagate. Yeah, that would be cool. Go ahead. I'm fine with that. Restoring some ecological balance. Again, it'd probably be classier than taping myself to a tree or chaining myself to a bulldozer or something like that. Anyway, yeah, there's a really cool, I think, spin on that where people are kind of being eco-warriors in a way, by restoring a natural balance in ways. Anyway, great. What else? What else? And what else other ways can we be, how can we be a positive factor for biodiversity? These have all been really good so far.
Kind of along the lines of what you were just talking about, like we can remove invasive species or help control invasive species to like help native species grow more and in turn like that area have more biodiversity. I know that there's a lot of programs where you can go in and like, particularly with plants, I've working with people who just remove huge areas of plants that are just like taking over like toad flax and stuff like that. So the native species can come back in, and turn it helps the pollinators and the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, excellent. And then, so somebody typed in ecological restoration efforts in national parks. Absolutely. A lot of that's being done by hunter and fisher folks, right? I know that back in the Midwest, you have to make sure that if you're putting into different rivers or lakes that you're not transporting, like you don't pick up certain types of clams or mussels or invasive plant species as well, so that you're not spreading it from body of water to body of water. Good. And I think that's, you know, those efforts of, you know, those efforts are succeeding with the help of people who are doing that. Good. Who else? Maybe one other. Anything else we can think of? One more? Returning wolves back to Yellowstone. Yeah, didn't in Iowa or Wisconsin the other day, they just have their first wolf hunt and killed over 50 wolves. Yeah, there's something going on in Wisconsin. I do believe so much going on in Wisconsin, but I'm okay dissing on Wisconsin because of the Packers. Anyway, and I'm a Bears fan. No, I won't diss on Wisconsin, but I know that you have to keep numbers in control and things like that, but I'm not so sure that that's, I would need to look into it. It's important to look. Returning wolves back to Yellowstone, yes, found out really at an early time that wolves play an important part of the ecosystem, but not early enough to have it, you know, you found out because you took a part of that diversity of the ecosystem out. And then of course, you know, things return. So yeah, human beings can't be the ones to selectively decide that, because that's just not, that decision isn't ours, right? So yeah, absolutely. And, you know, despite what's going on in some areas, and I think, you know, I think a lot of things that were happening at the end of the last administration that were trying to drill in parks and national parks in Alaska, and also some protections that were lowered for some animals, whether those are wolves or polar bears in Alaska, I think a lot of that is being pretty fairly quickly reversed. And for good reason, you know, in a very not political way whatsoever, in a very biodiversity, this is how it needs to work. And, you know, a historical, like I said, preservation of our parks kind of piece. Okay, awesome. These are all fantastic ideas and good examples. So a few people said, no, we can't be a positive impact. But I have to throw that question in and put that question in because, you know, we're talking in every chapter really about how we're not, you know, making a positive impact. So again, we can identify countless areas in which we have taken the responsibility trying to do that. And I still think being pretty successful with that. All right. So agriculture, even with agriculture, this is a phrase that I repeat a lot that I think is important for us in this biodiversity piece, which is, again, no amount of technology can replace. They reintroduced the wolverine to the Rocky Mountains, still in the works. Cool. Anyway, no amount. So we said no amount of money can replace the biodiversity services. It should also be known that even though they're working on tiny little bees, like robotic bees and things like that, no amount of technology can replace nature either. And if we're going to really, technology is not an instant fix. And I think we know that. But then again, we're in an area right now where the first thing we think to do is apply technology. If we apply technology to something pretty basic like birthing, we'll see that we have some of the most technology, we spend the most on it, and yet for infant mortality rate, I think the United States is about 34, meaning that there are 33 or so countries that have much less access, much less technology, much less money spent on birthing and do it better, right, than this country. So the same is true when we look at, you know, applying it to our natural world. It's not necessarily going to be able to make the fixes that we would hope it can. So, you know, mitigation up front before you have to fix something, right? So making soil habitable for plant growth, obviously central to the breakdown of nutrients as we look at biodiversity services, particularly for agriculture here, right? Makes pollination possible, pest control, future of food security. Now we have to understand that plant breeding is one thing that's been around for a while, and hybridization is very different than changing things on a genetic level, right? Pollination and cross-pollination, things like that. There have been ancient ways and ways that just, you know, our natural world functions. When we get into genetically modified, I could do, really, I stay away from this to a certain degree in as far as we talk about it a little bit, but we could do a whole lecture on it. And I should sometime. But it really is a game of pollination, patents, poison, and patience. And you know, again, there's a lot of things that we can look at from a sociological standpoint and say, and the same thing could be applied with ADD drugs, perhaps, and our understanding of ADD. And then we just like throw a bunch of drugs at it or whatever that might be, science. And then we realize that that might not necessarily be the case. There's a lot of other variables with that. The same is true with what we've looked at. You know, like I said before, just because a seed is drought resistant doesn't mean that when we get levels of drought like we've experienced, that even in the Midwest, you don't lose most of in a season if there's a drought. Your corn that is 95% genetically modified to be drought resistant. We have to have the conditions in the soil able to grow in the first place. It can't be poisoned or played out or working against itself. So needless to say, I think that we won't make a value judgment other than there are different ways to do it that are being proven on farms with either traditional or organic methods of restoring an ecosystem. And I think the best example of this that I've seen in any video, and I'd like to watch it, and I'll probably show it this semester because not everybody's seen it yet, is The Biggest Little Farm. Has anybody seen that documentary? It's a pretty amazing documentary about people who buy a property and then have to restore that property. And what they really find out is that if they're trying to do it themselves, you know, those links in the chain and what they think they should do, and it's not necessarily the way that everything works in a biodiverse integrated system. So an ecosystem. So anyway, a really interesting piece. And there are ways, I think, other than technology to try and replace and sustain things like farming and ways that I think are positive. And one is saving money, because we looked at just how many more millions of gallons and what that percentage, what was it, 250% or more increase for Roundup, glyphosates, and just in general, that is causing a burden, of course, on our healthcare system for people who get cancer and can't work. And anyway, so we've got economic conditions and concerns. We have growing conditions and concerns, safety growing conditions and concerns. And then of course, you know, what's the value of something like seed saving? And how are other cultures doing it, right? And I think, yeah, it's really exciting and important. And Carolita just wrote this, soil health has finally entered policy discussions, and it's really exciting. It is really exciting. And I think that in ways we find out that less is more. And again, in this class, whether it's with transportation and going back to electric trolleys, or whether it's with so many of these things that we realized that we were doing it better before. And so now we return to it. And although it appears new to people, much of it is not. It's how we're managing it and how we're re-looking at it again. And you know, there's a lot that goes into that, right? All right. So commercial forestry, we're looking at here, hunting, firewood, nature watching. Like I have a big list here as far as the value. And again, these are the things, right, that we think about it in terms of what do we get from it as far as like a forest. But we have to understand that it's really interesting to me that we start to form these ideas as human beings about value at a very early age. And did I talk in this class yet about working with the kindergartners and doing the tree unit for the kindergartners? No? I mean, I may have mentioned that I did it, but it's really interesting because on this list, right, that I just asked, it's like hunting, wild food, firewood, you know, recreation does make it on there. But when I talk about trees to kindergartners and I say, all right, so what do we use trees for? Or what's a tree used for? And this is not to be cute. This is the reality. Kindergartners will raise their hands and say, a friend. They'll raise their hands and they'll say, a place to play. And look, I'm not tugging on any heartstrings here. This is really the value that everybody's face that I see right now, we have all felt that value as a kid. A fort, a super creative space, somewhere to hang out and read a book, somewhere to kiss somebody behind. I don't know, like whatever that might be. We have all these connections and they provide all these services that are not at all when we're 20 and 30 and 40 and 50, how we think of what we use a tree for. And yeah, sure, it does tug at the heartstrings, but have you read The Giving Tree? I mean, it's a fantastic, most everybody has, Shel Silverstein. And you know, we have to, that's the big piece of that book, and a big piece of what we're talking about here is how do we learn to value a tree beyond commercial forestry? That's like the bottom of the bucket, chop it down and use it piece. And I honestly think that now we are in a very exciting time because we can see our forests. I mean, now you can cut them down and we can be responsible about that. Yes, and there's a lot of dead trees and beetle kill, and it's important to manage forests. It doesn't have to be one or the other. That's usually like the scenario, right? Full on hippie, let it grow, or just like cut it all down. No, it doesn't have to be one or the other. We can manage, right? And you've got that. But with forest spaces, we've also got to understand that by growing hemp, right, we are absolutely going to slow that down by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times deforestation. And now we're on it several times a year. I mean, we are looking right now, and a friend of ours wrote a grant at building a stage for the shows that we do in our backfield, and it's going to be a Hempcrete stage. I just saw a whole truckload up close of my friends that are building a barn from hemp wood. I mean, it all got delivered, pressed boards, incredibly tough, pouring the foundation with Hempcrete. And this is not hippie business, folks. This is the future of sustainable and way cheaper materials. You know how expensive it is to pour a cement pad for anything? I mean, it's intense. So breathable sound, the sound stuff, I guess it helps absorb and let through sound instead of just slapping it back like concrete would. I'm really excited about it, but it should be exciting. Hemp is not going to get anybody high. We know that if you smoked a telephone pole of it, you would just have a headache. Good grief. Do we really have to talk about this in the year 2021? I suppose we do. That being said, that is really going to help us re-coordinate how we value forests. You know, it's about time, and I'm not on a soapbox, about time you stop chopping down something that takes 200 years or 100 years to grow for something you could harvest 4 or 5 times a year. The economics of it, again, that's going to become a less viable or less good looking thing, deforestation or commercial forestry, because something else is going to be easier and make more money. And that's the thing about these, you know, you could take offense again that gas and oil is, you know, not getting the love at 99% of the subsidies. They are getting the love. They're just, you know, they're getting beat in the race because they are, because that's what happens to industries and things and cultural beliefs and practices that we find and agree upon collectively just don't work anymore compared to other ones. So love it. I read somewhere there's only 47 years of oil left. And how many years of water with underground aquifers that we poison that we have no idea about? I mean, let's eyes on the prize. I'm staying alive. All right. Hey, that'd be a good song. All right. Let me go back here and screen share. Awesome. Okay, so gonna get past that. Fisheries. That's right, it's me. In the Fox River, one of my favorite places. Fishing. Yes, Jason. Jason, you are taking those fish from the river and killing them and taking something out of the food chain. No, if I didn't tell you, my dad and I are the most pathetic fisher folks in that he's allergic to them and has to wear gloves even, or else if it touches his skin, he'll break out. And I know what's in the river, so I will not eat them. So we throw back everything. And catfish, I mean, they've been hit by a boat motor. They've gotten in fights. They're like an ancient, prehistoric, awesome fish. I really can think of nothing that I love more than sitting on a river in a boat and fishing for catfish. It's so awesome. But it's way different than sustenance fishing. And when my dad and I are on that river, there are people all up and down the bank that are fishing for their dinners that night, you know, like to survive, to stay alive. So, you know, sport fishing, one thing, sustenance fishing, another. The folks that are sustenance fishing do not have the privilege that I have of choosing not to eat that fish because I know what's in that water. I know it's a high lead level, a high pesticide level. I can guarantee it. Can you eat a couple fish and be fine? Sure you can. But that's a privilege that I have. So a difference, right? And then of course, fisheries, fish catch dependent on functioning diverse ecosystems. So these are really important. When we had the floods here a while back, I think they destroyed or flooded out the fishery that's here in LaPorte, that's over by the lake. But now that I believe is back up and running again, and important so that, you know, we can still have trout, people can still enjoy it. These native species can still survive. Human beings, again, just like zoos, and we'll talk about that in a minute, intervening. So love it. Recycling nutrients, assuring desirable water quality for agriculture, fisheries, human consumption. Look, we know this, the more species, the better the water. The more diversity, the better something functions. And that is just, that's science, folks. That's not even a value or a sociological value judgment on culture. All right, do people sing in the shower? I don't even know if people sing in the shower anymore. Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. Anyway, no, wait, back to this one. How about how long is your average shower? All right, let's talk about showers. My partner's average shower is about 20 minutes, I swear. I teach this class and I would love to take a longer shower, but I'm dad, so I'm supposed to worry about the thermostat and the water usage and, you know, all those types of things. That's my role. Let me see here. I asked it of you showers. Okay. About how long are your showers? One person said 2 minutes, 14 said 5 minutes, 26, about twice that, said 10 minutes. Then we're going back down the other side. 15 minutes is 11, and longer than 15 minutes is 8, where we had one that was 2 minutes. So most of us, you know, around 10 minutes of shower time, which is, you know, of course, right? I stopped shaving purely to save water time. I stopped shaving because simple. Okay, let me see here. If you knew, oh yeah, so here's my real question. If you knew that you could get sick from taking longer showers because of contaminants, would you take a shorter shower? 28 people said yes, yikes. 2 people said no, I do what I want. I love those people. 32 said, what's in my water, Jason? So let me flip back to that. Sounds like you're asking me because there's something in my water. Oh, no. All right, here, let me head back here and screen share. But yes, right, of course there's something in our water. There's a lot in our water. And I had to look at that again. What's in my water? Sorry, I'll stop this for a second. And what's in our water? And so I've had a chance to talk. We've got a few different water places around here, many, but one is, we have to understand that they're all different. One up at Horsetooth is separate, little water plant. And the one that's in Loveland is its own. And then there's one for Fort Collins. And we experienced one that is the North Fort Collins water. That's the total rural country water where I don't pay my bill for 4 weeks. And then I go in there and they're like, I'm sorry, I haven't paid my bill for like a couple or 4 weeks, 4 months. I've done that before. And then I go down there and they're like, how's it going on the farm? And I'm like, yeah, I owe you a bunch of money. And they're like, we know where you live. And I'm like, is it 1955? Anyway, that's different water as well. Actually, and I've lived in Loveland. Oh, tragic as that seems. The water's really chlorinated. And the water at Horsetooth, because I've never actually lived in Fort Collins proper. It's funny, I've lived all around it. Water at Horsetooth is kind of earthy. I may have said that before. The water out here is maybe the one that I like the best in subtle ways, if that makes any sense. But all different, and all of those water scientists, people that work there, people, hydrologists, people that are going to multiple conferences every year to try and solve water problems. And they all said the same thing. Look, we are going to these conferences and we can get out most of the lead, we can get out most of the arsenic. Yeah, right. But what we haven't been able to do is get out the pharmaceuticals at our, and we're going to look at some numbers, but you know, at a time of like in 20 years, pharmaceutical use in our culture has gone up like 100 or 200%. So people are ingesting that, and then that's going back into the water system. And he's like, we simply can't get rid of it all. All right, so I'm not trying to ruin your showers, but what does that have to do with shower time, Jason? Well, your skin is the largest organ in your body. So let's just say it's raining LSD. That's I just had to pause just to see the various amounts of reactions from the students. Hey, that's my partner. As I say, it's raining LSD. She runs back outside. No. If it is, hypothetically, it's raining acid, that's what LSD is, right? And you'll have a psychedelic experience. You'd only have to be out there for a second naked and run back in the house before you've got several days on your hand of something that you're going to have to find to do. Keep it cool. Just keep it cool. All right. That being said, if you shower, right, and your skin is the largest organ in your body, and there's a lot of chemicals, and there very much are pharmaceuticals. That's where they're finding fish in river systems to be hermaphrodited or not be able to. They're finding people that are not taking birth control, not able to have kids. There's a lot of externalities from antidepressants being in our water. The point is, we can't get that out of our water. So the longer we shower, the longer we bathe. Water experts around here understand that that's, an externality that people are dealing with. So I'm not trying to ruin your showers, but it is something for us to look at as we look at water quality. How can we purify water? What's that look like? It's hard enough, and we'll see in the next chapter, to even make desalinization a thing, that would be clean or cost effective. But I would say taking the chemicals out of the water that we have, that we know is at least somewhat decent, to be even, a more pressing issue. So, all right, screen share back here again. Okay. So biodiversity, do humans suck? No, we don't, but we do, but we don't. Right. So in fact, cultural diversity is not merely parallel biodiversity. It is profoundly interconnected with it. This is why we look at it from a sociological standpoint. Sorry, somebody just said, if I drink tap water, am I drinking the same water in the shower as bad as chemical? I mean, it depends on the type of filtration. We'll look at where people are getting most of their water. Some people are getting it tap water. Some people are doing it like filtered from a store where they do like double reverse osmosis. Some people are doing some type of filter at home. All of those things still mean, yes, some percentage of those pharmaceuticals and chemicals were unable, you know, and now finally, look, it was just a handful of years ago that they started labeling storm drains on campus and in other places. Like put 2 and 2 together. You can't, this goes to this. That's a really big behavioral functional step, right? That's important to get people to realize that. So we are the greatest threat to biodiversity, but we are not an inherent risk. We are and can make, as we looked at, a positive impact on biodiversity. All right, King Julian. Somebody needs to break King Julian out. All right, so ex situ and in situ, these are some terms that I would like you to know, absolutely, for the exam. So this is, you know, trying to preserve, sampling, transferring, storing of species in a place other than the original location where it's found. So again, I mentioned it, but we think of ex situ and in situ preservation and things like that methods as being, you know, animal associated, but we're also associating it, you know, with seed banks and other forms of biodiversity that we're trying to preserve. So that's, a zoo is another form of that. We've got to preserve it, but think about it. I mean, and of course, more like what we want to be at and where we want to be as human beings is probably like in a dream world, more in situ, right? Management of a species at the location of discovery. The reason that horrible people can still go to Africa and hunt and pose with like a giraffe or a rhino or something like that is because when you do it in situ, you're talking about really dedicated small groups of people patrolling millions of acres. And the reality is that it's very, very difficult, very, very difficult to be able to completely protect, especially with small numbers. So yeah, maybe cloning or breeding programs in the future is what's going to be happening. But for now, we're trying to preserve on site. We're also trying to preserve in another place. All right, so hold on here. This is my dad's company. They make water content detectors connected to an app on your phone. They came up with it for the Flint water crisis. Wow. I was noticing some people commenting here. Abe, would you send that to my email so that I don't have to sift through all this and filter all this out? Thanks. I'd like to get on that. That'd be fantastic. That's very cool. Then there must be an app for senators to ignore it. If it comes from certain communities, they just have like a setting. What's the socioeconomic line here? Just gonna set it to ignore. And then once it hits $1 million, we'd better do something about it. Yeah, well, I can be snarky because I know all about social stratification. All right, so let's talk about human extinction. We have not. Yay! It's important because we are already talking about human and tribal extinction. It has already taken place. It has taken place for some time. If you lose a language, in many cases, when it's not written down, you lose a culture. That's something that I talk about in the Social 100. You can write this down if you want. Language is the key to all culture. Okay, for so many tribes and groups of people, it's important, right? Food. Biodiversity for living. These indigenous people, this is where we steal biopiracy, a lot of the ideas for medicines that people make billions of dollars off of. So, you know, a reason to preserve it is not only human life, but this is where you're really going to be, you know, finding a lot of these things. And the people who have this knowledge, a lot of modern cultures do not. But unfortunately, logging is a big deal, displacing these people, and human tourism. Okay, we're not going to watch this right now, but it's only a few. Minutes long. Watch it because it's really interesting about these tour buses that are supposed to travel through this place, but people are getting out. They're messing with the culture. They're videotaping them. They're sexually harassing them. All sorts of. Yeah, it's bizarre. The police. The ones that are taking these tribal members into the truck in this video are actually, you know, getting grabby with the women who are barely, you know, dressed and things like that. So it's bizarre, but plants and biodiversity, you know, other than humans are not immune to this, and particularly indigenous cultures, right? So knowledge, you know, are we putting it to use or not? I mean, the knowledge that is this indigenous knowledge has to be practiced, and it has to pass on for it to exist. Okay, so this is something I want you to know. Cultural knowledge tied to traditional crops is rooted in practice. That's called cultural transmission. Cultural transmission. And in many of these places, in many of these tribes or indigenous cultures that have very little human contact outside of their own tribe, you know, once it's gone, it's gone. Again, it's not being saved, it's not being logged onto a cell phone, there's no computer database. And yes, there are people who are doing that, because we know that these biocultural diversity, once it's gone, it's gone, it's lost forever. Which brings us to this piece of biopiracy, which sounds cool because I'm interested in pirates, but is not. In fact, it's a massive tragedy that we are now only trying to sort of help these communities and cultures recover from. So know what this means: the loss of biodiversity through legal and illegal means, whether that's court litigation or whether that's just stealing of indigenous knowledge. Now, and this is, is anybody here a fan of George Carlin? He's like my absolute favorite comedian of all time. And George Carlin does a lot with language. So of course, for these people who are looking at these violations, it's biopiracy. If you are part of the company, though, you call it bioprospecting, which somehow tries to legitimize that piece. That is when folk knowledge or biological artifacts are exploited for commercial gain without compensation to those who discovered it or originated it. This is usually the practice. We are talking, and these are old numbers, 5 billion, 2% royalties, forget that, old numbers. $303 million for agricultural products, billions and billions of dollars for medicinal products. I mean, most of these people have not been compensated, and it's only been recently when they're trying to have these traditional knowledge databases where they're keeping this knowledge and they're trying to get some of these royalties and some of the big pharma money. And I want to say, how many of the top Fortune 500 companies are pharma companies? 8 out of 10? 5 out of 10, all of them? Yeah, I'm not sure, but I know it's many or most of them. So that is where a lot of that, and who is doing a lot of that as well. There's a lot of sociological realities here. I mean, you're not just going into these places and doing that and stealing it and not paying people for no reason. You're doing it because of a history of colonialism, racism, and oppression that would allow you to go into places and be like, oh, we just discovered you. You didn't discover America. And I'm not talking about Columbus. I'm talking about anybody from Europe. You can't discover a place that has people living there. It's just not possible. But that doesn't stop people. And I'm not talking about 1890. I'm talking about 2021 from going in and really doing some damage to these cultures. You know, then they get involved with patent laws, calling it their own, but they've taken them from indigenous folks. What is that? What is indigenous knowledge? Another good definition, knowledge that's unique to a given community, culture, or society. So meaning, you know, you come to these places, you come to these cultures, you sit down, you ask them, you learn about it. This is not something you would know. This is specific to a group of people, to a culture of people. Again, many are oral. So that means that many of these places can be plundered for private gain. And again, you know, we have to have this functions in a historical context, not a vortex of it, of let's just go and do this to these folks. They're easy targets to Fortune 500 companies and people who have been bioprospecting and pirating forever. Now we are trying to publish this indigenous knowledge, and that's another thing that sociologists do. They work with the digital people to publish these traditional knowledge data library. Know that, you know, we don't do a lot of abbreviations here, things like that, but that's a good one. I would say that there's still a big disconnect. These indigenous cultures are still in need of a lot of help, right? To preserve their culture and to also, I mean, if you are going to provide the world with a cure for cancer or with a medicine that helps millions of people, you should be fairly compensated. And we're not even close to that now. So many laws finally now make biopiracy illegal, but of course these companies are doing this under the radar. And yeah, they've even had conventions, a convention of biological diversity, specifically targeting at or looking at reducing biopiracy. So, you know, you have to have some pretty concrete steps to achieve that. Conservation of biodiversity, sustainable use of biodiversity, equitable sharing of those benefits, because we know that this is not from, but from the use of genetic resources. I mean, this plants and medicines and things that they're finding, breaking down and then reconstructing them in a lab, and then reusing them. Now, this does not apply to anything before 1992. If this knowledge was taken before 1992, it can be exploited, and certainly it is. And look, that's when I graduated high school. So we're coming up on what, 30 years? Is that crazy? But 30 years and still, I mean, it hasn't slowed down any. And this is like what we need to know ahead of time too. These companies know what they're doing. They know the potential value of it, and there's still no effort to compensate. So we're dealing with really old pieces, not only by any means of just financial pieces. These are race pieces and racism pieces and colonialism pieces. So anyway, I just want us to understand that, that's some context behind that, right? All right. You know, community conservation is where a lot of our solutions have come from, right? It emerges in Europe in the 19th century. The United States comes along and builds national parks. And of course, that's a huge win with a lot of challenges. But like I said, if you can go to PBS and you can look at the series that they have on national parks, gosh, the first one was so good that we watched the other one last night, which was on the sequoias and a whole different set of national parks and challenges that came with it. But that conservation is seen separate from development. And a lot of times we're looking at progress. What does progress mean? Well, if you define progress only in terms of digging new resources, building new places, using new, you know, destroying new biodiversity, then that's not progress. But we've reframed it. People know that there's been a great deal of progress made, both scientifically and for the preservation of our lives, and adding to human culture by having those. So, you know, genocide, removing of indigenous people, geez, you know, we still, our record here, and I can only speak to it in this country alone, but our record of how we deal with First Peoples is abysmal still in 2021. So we hope that we can improve that, because we can do better than taking human beings out of this equation, right? And right now, I think that the manager of all public lands or something like that, I can't remember her name. She's a Native American woman. And there's been a lot of pushback to this individual getting confirmed. I hope that this individual does get confirmed. Maybe Secretary of the Interior. I again, don't take my word on that, but look that up. Hopefully that person gets, would be our first Native American woman in that position. And I think she's, besides that, a scholar and has a great deal of information, deserves to be in that position. So it would be exciting. Yes. Yep. And I can't pronounce her last name. Deb Haaland. Holland. I don't want to, you know, no disrespect intended for not having heard that or paid enough attention, but that's important as well. It could be a big positive here. So we cannot be removed ultimately. So removing humans is not really going to happen. So a lot of our solutions are looking at, you know, how human beings can be place-based and highly participatory, and how do we involve people? Because one thing we know from a sociological point of view is if people aren't invested, if they aren't involved, if it doesn't seem real to them, or if they don't, it doesn't seem like they can help, then they won't. And if they feel like it's easy and preserving and doing their part for biodiversity is manageable and attainable and not laden with guilt, look, if it's easy, if it seems like it's doable, and that's why people talk all the time about, I think it's like, I don't like this phrase, but it's usable. Low hanging fruit, right? Have you heard that? You know, do the things that are easy or possible, you know, first. So being and having people in these places is really important. It is perhaps, not perhaps, it's more important now that we preserve our national parks, that we don't start cutting them down and drilling in them and losing the biodiversity. It's critical right now that we do not go that other way. And again, I do not feel that this is a one or other, a Republican or Democratic piece. This is absolutely a survival piece. And what can we do with the space that we have here in our country that we're responsible for, right? All right, that's it for this biodiversity chapter. I would like to start in with a little something. We have about 15 minutes. I want to do water. I think, you know what? We've been going pretty good since the exam. So I'm going to stop it here. And then we will continue on Tuesday for the full amount of time, rather than jump into something for 15 minutes, 10 minutes here, and then sort of get cut off halfway between. Because I'd like to show a little something to start off next class with. That's not too long, and then discuss it afterwards. Are there any questions from anybody? You can go ahead and start reading chapter 5 now. That's the chapter on water. Make sure that you make your first post. I know this is like, it is discussions as far as like an analogy for points is a slam dunk on a 2-foot basketball rim with a springboard, sticky gloves, and me lifting you up while you do it. Because it's your opinion, it's your sociological insights. If you take the time to know that it's coming up, and I really am going to guess that if there's around 60 people attending lectures lately, you're already the ones that are on top of this. So hopefully people, when they go back and see this video, get my reminders and stuff. But which chapters are the next exam on? That is a good question. Likely chapters 4 and 5. So biodiversity and water, and then a couple pieces, something that we're going to watch, maybe that dive movie, and something else that I'm going to show you here. There's another water piece. So yeah, we're still not, and I'm not sure when the next exam is, but I feel like it's not for a while yet. Let me go look real quick here. It's a good question. I think that's worth it.
Just look, it says the 11th.
11th of what, March?
Yeah.
Yep. Now, again, same format. So, we've got a couple weeks, but next Tuesday I'll start in on water and finish that on, Tuesday, and then on Thursday I'll finish water. And then we'll have Tuesday to talk about it. That next week, I'm going to be showing something in between. So I think we'll use up all our class time and we'll look at 2 chapters. Now, I think there's an advantage of looking at 2 chapters instead of 3, right? And we're not cramming in 3 chapters of stuff. We can look at it a little bit more thoroughly. So as a student, I think that, test number 2 should be even more manageable for folks. And that should go well. The average is looking good though, and people are doing well. If you have any concerns about your writing, if you didn't do well on the first solution assignment and you've got a page or half a page, and you want to send that to one of your GTAs, don't send it to me. I mean, I would look at it, but if you're working with somebody who's grading your stuff and they see your paper and know you're trying to work on it and then give you feedback, they're going to remember it when they grade it. It is going to work out for you. I imagine they'll know then that you tried to improve it. This is all just, you already know these things about college, but there's a way to make sure that you're going to do well. And I think that everybody seems to be pretty much on track for that. If you got a reminder, like I said, if you're getting lower than a C in here, and that's just with like very little data, but still you may have gotten an email about it because they do that, for like an early kind of heads up type of thing. It's not the end of the world because we don't have that many points in yet. But if you did get that, then it's a good idea. Also, I want to remind everybody that our food drive is live. Okay, follow the link. Donate to the food drive, share that link. If you've got a grandma or an aunt who is looking for something to donate to, those people exist. Like I said, my mom was spayed or neutered like 5 dogs a year for people that didn't have the resources to do it. So maybe somebody wants to help raise your grade with a donation to the Larimer County Food Bank and help feed some people in the same time, which I think is very, very, very cool. All right, no other questions. Be good people and do good things. Abe, please send me that link. If you have any questions, I am more than willing to Zoom meet anytime with you that you want. Mask up, stay safe, and yeah, see you next time. Peace.
Mr. Downing, one quick question. The thing you said about like exploitation of indigenous peoples, where was the link to that?
It's right on that slide. So I'm talking about that, and I guess so. If you look back, you can look at the under modules for chapter 4 is this PowerPoint. Download that, and then you can copy that link from in there. It's a really interesting piece.
Okay, and then the one other question, and then so next week we're doing water, and then the week after that is the test.
It is at the end of that week, but we will still have class session and be doing things on that.
I don't know.
Tuesday and Thursday.
Go with my friends somewhere.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yep. Take care, man.
Yeah.
See ya.